So, being the season of Hanukkah, naturally you're going to hear lots of drashot, shiurim, commentaries, explanations for different things. And among them, you're going to find that many of the commentators have this approach, perspective, that Judaism is all about the inside, about the spirituality. It's the intent, the kavanah. It's all about ha'ikar kavanah. And Greek culture was the culture that focused on the superficial, on the physical, on the aesthetic, as if to say the inside, the interior, what's going on inside a person's mind, inside a person's soul is not so important, but they focused an awful lot on beauty, on aesthetic appeal, on maybe embellishment. So the Gemara makes many comments to this effect. That one who didn't see Greek pillars, for example, columns, the way the Greeks used to construct the Romans too, for that matter, they constructed their buildings, hasn't seen a beautiful building in his life. The Gemara even comments on the Greek language itself, calling it an especially beautiful language. I don't get that one, but it's in there. Everything ends with is. Okay, that's cute for the first 2 or 3 sentences. I guess you get tired of it, but all the Latin-based languages actually dropped that. Nobody even presents Spanish a little bit. But the Gemara says that Greek is the most beautiful of the languages, I guess, outside of Hebrew. That there's something to this aesthetic appeal. So, what is our relationship with the superficial, with the exterior? What is our attitude, our approach to beauty, to luxury, to maybe a little bit of embellishment, indulgence, I guess would be keywords that would all come into under the umbrella of this greater discussion. So it's unfortunate that many of us associate Judaism with poverty, with kind of scrounging things together, fighting tooth and nail, and sort of struggling to survive. We don't have examples of what Judaism used to look like, of what Eretz Yisrael used to look like. The time of Shlomo HaMelech, when Beit HaMikdash was built, when the empire was still more or less intact, and before the exile of the 10 lost tribes. It's become basically part of Jewish culture, part of Jewish history, part of Jewish tradition, that we're always in a state of destruction. We're basically constantly talking about the exile. All of our holidays pretty much focus on redemption from Egypt, and then we talk about, inevitably we pray for the rebuilding of Beit HaMikdash, because right now it's in a state of destruction. And it's very difficult for us to appreciate that there were times when things looked and sounded different, when we had this luxury, if you will, of being able to do things, to accomplish things, to achieve things, and even to crown them with a bit more than just getting by or passing, but to actually make them beautiful. It's not just symbolic. I mentioned this last week, that the only place in the entire Talmud we have this expression, La Mehadrin, Mina Mehadrin, appears by Hanukkah. And it's ironic on many different levels that this is the holiday in which people who want to do the mitzvah and you want to pass it barely, it's one thing. You want to do it in a fancier, more impressive way, it's something else. But the Mehadrin, Mina Mehadrin, the embellishers, among the embellishers, they do the mitzvah in such a way that they beautify it. So what's the discussion? To fulfill your basic obligation on Hanukkah, you light one candle. Okay, we'll talk about this a little bit more in the halachic section of class. So you light one candle, fulfilled your obligation. The Mehadrin used to light one candle per person in the house. So if husband, wife, and 2 kids, so you would light 4 candles separately, together, it didn't really matter. The Mehadrin, Mina Mehadrin, among those who care about the mitzvot, those who care even more, those who want to make the mitzvot fancy and beautiful, what do? They light, what we would call today a menorah or a Hanukkah, with 1 candle per day, corresponding to the number of days. So if it's the first day 1, the third day 3, the last day 8. Pnei Yehoshua, famous Ashkenazi commentary on the Talmud, he writes something fascinating about Hanukkah, and he says like this: really, it's a bizarre story, it's a bizarre situation, a bizarre circumstance, that the Kohanim were looking through Beit HaMikdash. It had been defiled, And all they could find was one last container of olive oil that was pressed for at least 7 days in order to become shemen katit. This is oil that was pressed, mamash, it stayed under the pressure until 7 days were up, and this was the oil they would light from in order to make use of the menorah. So he asked the following almost heretical question. So what's the big deal? What's the big deal? If an individual wants to bring a qurban in Beit HaMikdash, you want to eat from sacrificial meat, you'd like to bring a sacrifice in order to fulfill a personal obligation. If it's neder, nedava, it's a donation basically to Beit HaMikdash, or a gift, so to speak, to the Mikdash. So you can bring your personal sacrifice, your personal qurban, only if you're in a state of purity. Have such thing as tumah and tahara. We have punishments prescribed for people who ignore the laws of tumah and tahara as they apply to Beit HaMikdash and what goes on inside it. When it pertains to a public sacrifice or to a public form of worship, this law can be suspended in the event that we can't find someone in a state of purity. And so according to the Rambam, to this very day, if tomorrow we decide to build the Beit HaMikdash, we can send a Kohen who is not necessarily in a state of purity. We assume that nobody in our generation is. We can send a Kohen into Beit HaMikdash in order to bring the Qurban Tamid, these two lambs that we bring, one in the morning, one in the late afternoon. True that for himself, in order to represent himself and bring a Qurban, he would have to be in a state of purity. This is not the case when it comes to the public. Right? It's the Tum'ah, Hudhata, it's el-Tzibur. When it comes to public sacrifice, there's a national need for this sacrifice to be brought. So if we can't find anyone who's in a state of purity who's worthy of bringing it himself, we would give the job to someone who's not pure. The same applies to a certain degree of areas, aspects of Beit HaMikdash life, one of them being the menorah. We found one can of olive oil that happened to have the seal of the Kohen Gadol on it, but what's the really big deal? At the end of the day, if we couldn't find pure oil, we would have lit oil that wasn't pure. That's okay. It's a public sacrifice. It's something that we need to have the menorah lit every day in Beit HaMikdash, in the morning, in the afternoon. What's the big deal about bringing oil that wasn't pure?
No.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question, because like for later, the menorahs look different. The one that there was in the Beit HaMikdash, I think, and the one that we like.
Yeah, there's a whole dispute about the shape of the menorah, if it was actually straight branches, if they were curved. Rambam, it sounds like they were straight. But yeah, also that the menorah in Beit HaMikdash only had 7 candles to it.
Right.
So we don't call, some people explicitly don't refer to the candles that we light on Hanukkah as a menorah. Menorah only in Beit HaMikdash, only 7 candles. We don't have the right to light outside of Beit HaMikdash, not as part of divine worship, if you will. But the menorah itself was lit from olive oil. And if, in the event, we couldn't find one pure can of olive oil, so what's the big deal? We would have been within our rights to go ahead and light the menorah without pure olive oil. It would have been okay. It would have fulfilled the obligation.
We would have, but then the Greeks would have succeeded in preventing us from fulfilling our Avodat Hashem in the best way we could.
But I think they did for like a bunch of days or something. Wasn't it like, was it the first time that there was no light in the Beit HaMikdash?
It was, to the best of my recollection, from the time of the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash until the second Beit HaMikdash was rebuilt, obviously nothing was being lit. Mm-hmm. From the dedication, the rededication, basically the dedication of the new Beit HaMikdash, the second time around, until that point, they hadn't missed.
Okay.
So I don't know. Apparently the Greeks, they defiled the entire Beit HaMikdash. I guess there must have been a few days where it wasn't happening, because for them to have gotten that far in, they passed the menorah a long time ago. The question is only, why is it that we have the impression that if they couldn't find one pure can of oil, that they would have had to wait another 7 days for the... We refer to this miracle as an 8-day miracle, right? We spoke last week about some of the rationale behind this. They found enough oil to last them for 1 day, correct? Mm-hmm. What's the big deal about it lasting 8 days? Simple enough. In order for the oil that they used to press for the lighting of the menorah was oil of shemen katit, right? Lechatet in Hebrew means to crush. So it was oil that was pressed from olives that had spent 7 days under these massive pillars and in the baskets, basically. That's how they used to do it. In case you ever wondered how they pressed olive oil before they had pneumatic and hydraulic pressure. They would just take very heavy pillars, they would stack olives up in baskets, one on top of the other, and they would put these massive pillars on top of them. The oil leaks out. They would or they wouldn't filter it. Health freaks today like the unfiltered oil, but back in the day they would keep it clean. So, what is the whole story behind the oil only supposed to be lasting one day and lasting another 7? The real miracle of Hanukkah, if you will, it's not they didn't have olive oil anywhere in Israel. It's that they didn't have pure oil. And in order for more oil to be pressed and to be ready on time, it would have had to be in another week. So we would have enough to light for the one day that we found it. By the following day, if we got, set up the pillars with the olives and everything, it's a setup that takes 7 days. By the time it was ready, we would have had 7 days during which we're not lighting. Wait a minute. Not lighting? What do you mean not lighting? It's okay to light in pure oil if you can't find pure oil. It's just a nice thing to have. Ideally, we would do this with pure oil. So this explains the Pnei Yehoshua is the point of Hanukkah. The whole message behind Hanukkah is not it passes, it suffices, it's okay, I get a check in the back. It's actually that we were able to do this mitzvah with pure oil, that we never needed to resort to using impure oil. Fine. A couple of points we need to make on this note. One of them is that don't prevent yourself from performing mitzvot in an unideal way if that's the only way you can do it. We have, halachically speaking, this concept of lechat achila b'di'abad. Lechat achila, loosely translated, means ideally. Why ideally? Well, lechat achila literally means in the beginning. So, ante facto, before you do something, here's the ideal, proper, most appropriate way to do it. B'di'abad literally means in Aramaic, in which you've done, or in which you did so. In a situation in which you've already done the mitzvah. Does it count? Does it not count? Well, if you already did it, and you fulfilled the obligation, we let it slide. If you ask me ideally, how should the mitzvah be done? I will tell you it should be done this way, or that way, or some other way. The Pnei Yehoshua is basically saying, this is the point of Hanukkah. Not that, the mitzvah couldn't have been done otherwise. It's that Hashem actually enabled us to perform the mitzvah in an ideal way, despite the unideal circumstances. Right? And that's a big difference. There's a difference between survival, subsistence, and thriving. We generally associate ideal situations with kind of luxury. If I had the money, if I had the time, if I had the patience, if I had, etc., fill in the blank, I would do my mitzvot in the most spectacular, fantastic, interesting, luxurious way. Because of various constraints, like time, like money, like patience, other priorities, etc., we don't always get our mitzvot done in the most ideal, fancy, beautiful way. Sometimes we just kind of work with what you have, and that's kind of it. So, here's an interesting thought. It's interesting that I heard this both from Rabbi Avidan and from Rabbi Sabato on very different occasions. But they both explained as follows. There are certain things in life that are considered luxury. So what does that mean, something considered a luxury? What's the definition of luxury?
You only have when you have an abundance of the world.
Something unnecessary, but something that just makes your life easier,
okay, it's not
pleasurable.
Not necessarily necessary. You could live without it. No one considers luxury to be something crucial or essential to life. So luxury is abundance. It's plenty. When you have things beyond what you need, beyond that which you require. So why do people invest in luxury? Why would anybody buy a watch fancier than one made of plastic? Not all of us work in a slaughterhouse, but I guess there are certain situations in which people will either judge you based on your watch, or where your watch sends a certain message, gives a certain impression. Maybe you want your watch to do more than just tell time, because the $10 Sony watch tells time too. It's less likely to get stolen. That I happen to like about simpler objects, but there's something more to just having a watch that tells time and gets the job done. It's fancy. It gives you a different perspective, appreciation, finer things in life, refinement. So, Rav Sabato would explain like this. Very often when it comes to our spirituality, when it comes to our mitzvot, when it comes to our learning, our investment in spirituality, we're in life support. who are basically in intensive care. Can barely get the job done. I can only do so much. I only have so much emotional energy or emotional or intellectual bandwidth. And I'm right now shooting for the basic bare bones. Sometimes in life, you are able to do more, you're able to invest a little bit more, and our mitzvot should be no exception. So during the galut, when we're persecuted, when we're being treated differently, we're discriminated against, when making a life and livelihood are difficult, you don't have the extra energy, the extra time, the extra funds to invest in something fancier. One of the biggest curses of the galut, this is Rav Rezmi, is that we lost our appreciation for some of the finer things in life, especially as they pertain to mitzvot. Meaning, if I can barely pay my bills, I'm not going to buy a fancy car, I'm not going to wear fancy clothes, I'm not going to buy that fancy watch, etc. Once you have your basic needs taken care of, your next priority becomes, readjusting, shuffling, realigning your priorities, and where you're able to invest in anything beyond what's crucial or what's basically necessary, you're expected to do so with mitzvot. So there are people who have a certain galut mentality, if you will, who are observant, they're learned, and they don't have an appreciation for luxury anywhere in life. Wear simple clothes, eat simple food. When it comes to mitzvot, to do them simply because I have a simple budget. It's just beyond my capacity, beyond my field of interest to invest much more than this. There are people who have an appreciation of the finer things in life, despite what they told us when we were little, that it's unnecessary, it's indulgent, it's beyond what's required by Halakhah. There's actually something beautiful to it. Really good example of this: music and art. If you look in the fields of music and art, you'll see how over time, when people were depressed, they wrote depressing music, if at all. And art is one of those fancy, decorative, beautiful things that nobody has time or the patience for. So Rav Retbi, and this goes back already to Rav Ashkenazi, would say, with the founding of the State of Israel, and with the beginning of shifting into first, second gear on our way out of exile, we found that we were, in the very beginning, able to address our basic needs, like survival. So first it was take a weapon and learn how to fight. It was important, it was crucial, we were being attacked. Okay. Once we got beyond that, we have roads, we have schools, we have bridges. Now people take up an interest in expression, in art, in music, in sports, such a good example, but I guess to a certain extent. Meaning, naturally, we're looking for more than just survival. There has to be more than just not dying to life. That's not very inspiring. It's not very encouraging. Managing not to die, it's a skill. It depends where you live. But once you get beyond your ability to survive, you do hope to find something more inspiring, more interesting, more expressive to do. And this, Rav Retbi would say, is what's missing from many areas of Torah and observant Jewish life. We'll be well on our way to redemption, if you will, once we're able to look past just surviving, just not assimilating, just not, capitulating to the temptations around us, and going to a point where we can offer our kids and our grandkids not just survival, here's how not to die or how not to lose your Jewish identity, but here's how to express it, here's how to embrace it, here's how to give it, to embellish it, to decorate it, to do something more than just barely be able to pass it on. So, in that sense, both Rav Retbi and Rav Sabato would agree that it's a certain indicator of the health of our spirituality. The degree of artistic or luxurious expression that we seek for it. And the Gemara actually has interesting expressions about this. Classic example, pasuk in Shirat Hayam, as Shir Moshe, we say every morning in Shacharit, where one of the psukim reads, Ze Eli wanwehu Elohei avi v'aro minhu. Ze Eli wanwehu, this is my God, and I will, anwehu literally, I will embellish him, decorate or make fancy. So Gemara says, how do you fulfill this mitzvah? What does that mean to do something fancy, beautiful, to go beyond? So he gives an example. I can build a beautiful sukkah. I can, procure the beautiful exemplars of these four minim. I can write a beautiful Sefer Torah. I can wrap it with beautiful silk. I can, so all of a sudden, a Sefer Torah and silk. It's not just a matter of barely write it, put it together, save money wherever you can, and hopefully we'll have enough to write a Sefer. Now it's already, no, we have Sefer Baruch Hashem. Write a nice, big, beautiful Sefer, big, pretty letters, a nice parchment without any holes in it, etc. I can buy nice clothing and tie nice tzitzit on the corners if that's, I want to fulfill the mitzvah. So there's actually, there is such a concept. There's something to it. There's a point to doing more than just the basics. Now, we all appreciate this in different areas of life. When it comes to mitzvot, maybe a little bit less. So there's a funny story told about a certain talmid, a student from yeshiva, who comes to talk to his rav, and he says, Rav, things have been very difficult with Shlom Bayit. It's been a challenge. I prefer to invest in Torah and learning, and my wife has expectations, parnasah, paying the bills, cell phone, running water, etc. It's more than I bargained for. So I said, listen, you have to appreciate that women think differently, men think differently, but you'll find a way to make peace. Why don't you go pick up a bouquet of flowers, offer them to your wife, just as a show of good faith? So the student, it's actually a true story, by the way. The student, he goes, he buys a bouquet of flowers. So up next day at the yeshiva, Rav says to him, look at the flowers, they helped. They did something. It was kind of a breakthrough, a shower of outpouring of emotion. So he says, no, it was a disaster. But we've been fighting even more so I brought the flowers than we were before I brought them. So he said, impossible. I'd like to talk to your wife if it's okay in your presence. Go from the two of you. We'll just come and we'll discuss. We have to get to the bottom of this. So my wife's explaining, he doesn't pay attention. He doesn't really give me much by way of affection. I have to pull teeth in order to get him to do something around the house and to help pay certain bills. So he says, no, but the flowers that he bought you, they didn't help, they didn't mean anything. So he goes, flowers? What a disgrace. So what a disgrace. She said, he went and he bought the flowers, put them on the table. He said, here, the Rav said I should buy you flowers. So as guys, we hear these jokes, we're like, come on, he did it. What's the big deal? So it's nice to buy flowers, one thing, but kavanah wasn't exactly there. Flowers happen to represent a lot of the differences between men and women in the sense that, they only live so long and then they die. And you ask a guy, I say, look, why don't we invest in something, buy something a little bit more permanent than that? Even food, at least you can eat it, you get some kind of background. The flowers, they just sit there and go from pretty to less pretty to dead and then smelling. But there's something to be said for beauty, something to be said for enjoying the intricacy of the creation, how we can put such color contrast together. These kinds of things that hopefully men learn to appreciate as they get older. Another expression out of the Gemara, Masechet Brachot, last chapter, the Gemara says there are three things that literally expand one's horizons, whatever that means. Marchivin da'ato shel ha'adam. They expand your knowledge, your appreciation, your perspective, maybe would be the word we'd use to translate this. Dira na'a, isha na'a, kelim na'im. So, a beautiful apartment, a beautiful home. Look at the homes of antiquity, they weren't so fancy. People lived on top of each other in these tiny little shoeboxes. Someone got married, you made a little addition of a room to the side of the house. Right? Don't ever do that. Please promise me, all of you, you will never have your kids living anywhere near you when you get married. When they get married, come visit, nice place to visit. Give them their space, they need it. So a nice abode, a nice dwelling, a nice residence is something that expands horizons. Have to understand why. We'll talk about this in a minute. But a beautiful wife or an attractive spouse. I mentioned previously, there's a Shabbat, someone who's going to hell. But he sent me an interesting article in which there's a discussion about marital satisfaction, marital gratification between men and women, and the sensitivity that men have to their wives being considered attractive. Basically, the point of the study was that a man whose wife is considered attractive by him, by other people, I don't know, is ultimately more likely to invest in the relationship, and therefore she's likely to report, when surveyed, a greater degree of marital satisfaction. The way they explained it is that the guy is going to invest more if he feels like he's getting a good deal out of the marriage. Like he really feels like this is worth keeping. So he's inspired by the beauty, I guess would be the way to put it. So Rabbi reads an article like this, and he says, you know what? We need to teach every man how beautiful his wife is and how to appreciate the beauty that she has, but it's not what the article, it's not the direction the article was going in.
Yeah.
You read the article. So it's distressing in more ways than one, because it's one of these predictions for happiness in life. Either you have it or you don't. If you're beautiful and considered beautiful by men, then you're going to have a happy marital life, pretty much no matter who you marry. And if you're not that attractive, then you're lucky that you find a guy who thinks anything of you. Very disturbing. I would say quite the contrary. Every woman should hope to find a man who finds her appealing and attractive, and this is hopefully what brings people together, but Huffington Post doesn't think so. So, the third example of this is kelim na'im, beautiful, appealing utensils. Okay, so utensils that get the job done, and there are utensils that are nice. For example, from my own personal life, I happen to like knives. There are knives that work, that cut, simple wooden handles, made of a decent steel. I always like the really nice, well-polished, well-maintained knives. You look at them, you want to pick them up and cut something. That's inspiring. That's motivation. Sometimes each one of us have a computer. I guess you could look at it the same way. You have an old clunky computer that's, it takes time, it's full of viruses, etc. So you're not really that inspired by it. It gets the job done, it does what it needs to do, and whatever. Sometimes you get a new computer, it's quick, it's got all these options, don't even know what options it has, you never find an end to the apps that it can offer you, and probably get a virus before you can make use of them, but it makes the work a lot less unpleasant when you have neat tools and gadgets to help get the job done. So it's not that historically we didn't do work, we didn't get it accomplished. It's that having nice utensils makes the job more pleasant, more interesting. I guess this is the same way when it comes to finding an attractive spouse. It's one thing to be married. To have a zechut, to have a merit of seeing appeal in your husband or in your wife is inspiring. It's not just, oh God, here she's going to start again. I have to take out the garbage and you pay the bills, and I have to go shopping, and I have to order this and fix that. Okay, you find each other appealing. You're attracted, you're drawn to each other. Hopefully not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally too. Wow, so much fun, so exciting, so exhilarating. I love this woman. She's fantastic, beautiful. My husband is the greatest guy in the world, and I enjoy making him or her happy. I'm actually inspired more than just being married to couch potato, even an observant guy or girl who does mitzvot, but it's really inspired me all that much. There's something to be said for actually having some kind of interest, some kind of attraction beyond the basics. Same thing goes for an apartment. You can live in a basic shack in the projects. You can find something that's technically considered by the New York City Housing Authority as inhabitable. Just because the building is a little bit dilapidated doesn't mean that you can't live there. But life is a lot more fun and inspiring when you have more than just that. And actually, there's the Yetzer Hara that goes along with this too. When the exterior is so beautiful, when everything is heavily focused on the superficial, you lose the content. What am I married for in the first place? If we got married because I found you attractive, maybe I find other people more attractive now. Maybe it's time to reassess, to reconsider. If life is all about the beauty of your utensils, do you actually put them to use? Are you actually able to get your work done? Are they serving you? Or are you a slave to them? Are you constantly trading in your phones and your cars and your computers to get bigger, faster, fancier stuff and not actually getting the job done? So when it comes to beauty, when it comes to appeal, these things actually have a very special place. Matter of fact, Beit HaMikdash was one of the most beautiful buildings around. Gemara says it was the most beautiful building around. Shlomo Melech himself, when he built Beit HaMikdash, speaking of the menorah, the Torah requires us to have one, and he made 10. He made 10. Of all things, you could have doubled up in Beit HaMikdash. Mizbeach, I don't know. You could have built bigger courtyards. The Korban Pesach wouldn't take time. Millions of people coming to do the same thing in the same place. Almost so much you can get done. Here, specifically by the menorah, Shlomo Melech decided that yes, the Torah only requires one, but he made 10. He decked the place out. 10 beautiful golden menorot, more than he was required to do. But it was a way of beautifying, fancifying the mitzvah. My suggestion, on a very practical level, is that we can probably all do more in order to decorate a little bit, fancify a little bit, embellish a little bit the mitzvah that we do. There is a world of difference between dragging your feet to a mitzvah and doing a mitzvah with inspiration, with motivation. This is where the neshama starts to flourish, where the neshama actually connects to something and says, wow, this is fun, exciting, I enjoy it. Beautiful teaching of Nachman Breslev. where he says that the reward that you get for doing mitzvot is only proportionate to, it corresponds to the degree of simcha that you have while doing it. If you do a mitzvah without interest, without motivation, inspiration, right? Okay, I'll get up and I'll pray shacharit in the morning with a minyan if you want me to, but I'm doing you a favor. Don't ask me again tomorrow. I'm not making up twice. There are people who have this attitude towards their mitzvot, and so we shouldn't be surprised that the degree of sachar waiting for us, the degree of reward waiting for us after 20 years is also kind of, okay, well, you did what you did, you kind of barely got the job done, so here's the kind of barely gets the job done portion in the world to come. Being able to say, hey, I enjoy my mitzvot, I'm inspired, I'm motivated, I want to do more, I want to get as much into this as I can, I want to do a mitzvah, I'm going to look back on it and say, wow, I can be proud of this. It's fantastic, it's tremendous, I enjoy it, and I'm radiating contentment. That's an entirely different level altogether. So Rebbe used to talk about this in terms of specifically art and forms of expression. He would say, it's one thing that people do what they do, even in the religious realm. It's another thing when they're actually looking for ways to make it appealing, attractive, fancy. So things like poetry, song, music. I can tell you that my personal experience with this is that I don't find a lot of what's written today by way of Jewish music very interesting or appealing. It's kind of, this discussion recently, kind of unsophisticated.
Uninspired.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just Mashiach. It's like eating sugar with a spoon. It's cute. I guess it sells. People get interested, get into it. But really nice, thought out, skillful, talented, musical composition is a bit lacking. You would say it's something unnecessary, something extraneous, something superfluous, but no, it actually means something. David HaMelech, to remind you all, was a musician. He actually did play on the harp. He actually did compose. It was a Sefer Tehillim. People might consider it to be a waste of time. As a matter of fact, famous story out of Lithuania in the 19th century. Very famous Rab, disciple of a very famous Rab, was once approached by one of his Talmidim. And his Talmid said, he heard that the Chidah Kadosh of Chaim Yosef David Uzulai from Morocco moved to Israel. He's actually the Talmid Muvhak of the Or HaChaim Kadosh, Rabbi Chaim Ben Attar. So, two successive generations of tremendous giants in Torah from Morocco. So, this Talmid comes to Rav and he says to him, I just read that the Chidah Kadosh used to finish Sefer Tehillim twice every Shabbat. Once at night, the entire Sefer Tehillim. It takes a good 2 hours if you're fluent in it. That's an hour and a half if you're speed reading. I don't think he was speed reading. And he would finish it again during the day. So not necessarily in one sitting, but he'd be sure to finish twice. David HaMelech was born on Shabbat, he passed away on Shabbat, so there's a connection between this and Shabbat. The Rav told him, no, Sefer Tehillim, it's nice for Bali Batim, for Amei Haaretz. He said, you should be learning Gemara if you can learn Gemara. Bechida, who knows why he did what he did. Tradition has it, this Rav got very, very sick over the course of almost an entire year, and that he had the zechut of making many siyumim on Sefer Tehillim, having read it from beginning to end many, many times, while he really believed that he was on his deathbed. Ultimately, he was healed from this. The message as transmitted, the Rabbaim that I heard the story from, that it's one thing to learn halakha, to learn the basics, which tefillin are kosher, which ones aren't, where do we mix milk and meat, etc. How do we keep Shabbat? What's the violation of it? David HaMelech was singing the song of the neshama, feeling the neshama, having a conscious awareness of what you do. Every breath he takes, everything he eats, everything he drinks, everything he sees, inspires him, motivates him to the point that he composes Tehillim. Now, it's not just song, it's not just praise, not just poetry. There's tremendous depth to it. But the idea that this was an expression at a time where Am Yisrael is living in Israel, Beit HaMikdash is about to be rebuilt, and he really, he looked for the most spiritually viable way to express this in prophetic terms that could be appreciated for generations going forward. So it was more than just survival, it was more than just getting the job done. The beauty of Sefer Tehillim, which is why they're so powerful, is because they were composed at such a high level with such interest, motivation, inspiration, that this is what we tap into when we read them. Yeah.
But so if you, I don't know if it is an example, but let's assume you have limited resources, right? So let's say instead of buying a pair of tefillin for $500, you decided to apply the luxury concept and spend $1,000 on tefillin. But you know that those additional $500 can be spent to do tzedakah or to do something else. So how do you decide to indulge in a way in the tefillin at the expense of something else that is probably, it can be more important. I don't want to judge, but it can be more important.
Good question. So here are a couple of quick thoughts on this. Number one, I heard this from David Feinstein when I was on the Lower East Side. My last year of college, I was going to Shiva in the morning. He once commented to his students that all of the humrot, all of the strictures of these last generations, basically going back 100 years, they all apply to very much quantifiable concepts. So if I want to be strict, I can be strict by requiring a bigger cup for kiddush, by requiring a larger matzot, by requiring a shorter baking time for the matzot, by requiring, I don't know, a certain length of a skirt or covering hair to a certain distance, etc. It's all very easily quantifiable. Meaning, basically, the point that he was making was that it's all the kind of thing, the kind of things that you can brag about to your friends, that you can compare and contrast and say, well, my tefillin costs more than yours because the boxes are square to a certain degree, certain microns, and the black paint is so thick, etc. But it was very devoid of spiritual content. Is basically the point that he was making. It's very hard for us to be strict or to invest when we don't feel that there's something quantifiable that was gained or achieved by it. Like we're looking for reasons to be able to invest in something, and we're looking for some kind of feedback or some kind of, I have to be able to pat myself on the back or clap hands because I can measure what it is and I can apply the concept. The Gemara gives a guideline that hidur mitzvah ad shlish. When you want to embellish a mitzvah, what's considered a halachically viable embellishment? You invest up to 1/3 beyond. So if a kosher pair of tefillin, let's say an ideally kosher pair of tefillin, okay, you can make them out of sheepskin and a goatskin, they don't last very long, but let's say you make a pair of tefillin out of cowhide. So kosher, decent, normal pair of tefillin, let's say, I don't know, pull a number out of a hat, costs $600. So if I want to invest in a fancier pair of tefillin, the general halacha guideline is that up to 1/3 of this value, meaning up to $800, is considered normal. Beyond this, not so clear. Not so clear. It's not that we don't have examples of people who did invest more than that in certain mitzvot. As Rav used to say, going fancy or beyond fancy, like going out of proportion, ultimately comes back to you in the form of judgment. Meaning, if you're going to invest in something, but to such an extensive degree, it's inevitably going to cause judgment to be drawn upon you because you will have lost your proportion somewhere. Well, Ain Hara, as far as other people are concerned, but even from a heavenly perspective. So, you spend so much money on this one mitzvah, what other mitzvot are there that you're not even careful about, that you don't even pay attention to, that you're not even fulfilling, or avirot that you're transgressing? So, the world's biggest problem is that your tefillin costs less than $2,000. This is going to bring the Mashiach. So, those questions of how much should you invest are very personal questions in the sense that they obviously apply differently to different people. Someone who has the ability, has the wherewithal, is capable of doing more and doesn't do it, you would say such a person not so positively regarded by society. Someone who's on a higher level, who understands more of the detail of the importance of the proportion of different things. So at some point it's expected that you should invest more in your mitzvot. If you're capable of it, you have the time and you have the efforts and the resources, then you are strongly encouraged to do it. How far do you go on a given mitzvah when you could be doing more with others? That's a question of perspective. I can give you a lot of different examples of this. And I spoke once of Mordechai Sharabi. Rav Sabato told me he saw this with his own eyes. Rav Sharabi said every week his wife, Leah, would give him whatever she could scrape together by way of money and say, go to the shuk and bring us what we need for Shabbat. So he would go, and inevitably, by the time he went to the shuk and came back, he gave it all away. He'd buy a fish for Shabbat, see somebody who needs fish more than him. Well, I haven't had fish in a month. I bought this for you. It's not even... I need fish. We'll have a little bit of celery. It'll be okay for 2 days. Yes, he's a tremendous tzaddik. He lives life on a totally different plane. At some point, by the way, his wife stopped budgeting this and just went to do the grocery shopping herself. Rav Zabato's point was that this is someone who just a different planet. Someone who lives life in a totally different way. So for him, he sees the value of tzedakah. He's inspired and he's motivated by it. So who am I to say that this was the wrong decision to make? His wife, maybe, but for me to judge and to say this mitzvah is more important, that one's more important. Okay, so someone who's serious and careful about all his mitzvot, he finds one mitzvah is especially important or especially motivating or inspiring. That's what you're connected to do it. I'll give you another example of this. Rabbi Avidan Elkin, a famous tzaddik who lived in Yerushalayim before the founding of the state. Talmid of Rav Yitzchak Cohen Cook, Rav Cook, first chief rabbi of the Jewish settlement in Israel. So he was famous for several things. One of them was that he was known for helping people out, people who were in prison. There were a lot of Jews that were, fighting with the British mandate at the time, trying to.
He gave his daughter, didn't he?
Sorry?
He gave his daughter to a former prisoner, no? He was teaching this one guy who was in a cell.
He had the zechut to bring these people, because some of these people were...
One guy married his daughter. Right?
Yeah. Some of these people, unfortunately, he lost 2 sons to starvation. Destitute. He was absolutely beyond the poverty line. And he once spoke, I believe it was to Rav Cook, and he asked him, he said, look, I enjoy learning Torah. I'm thank God, able to do it, and I've seen a bracha from my learning. But I spent time with prisoners, people that are on death row. Some of these people were executed. So people who are in jail, people who are depressed, people who live in a world of anxiety, and I just feel like I have this natural calling to do this. So how much time do I spend doing this when I could be doing other mitzvot that maybe are more important? He said, no, there's such a thing as your own personal mission. Your neshama feels drawn to this particular mitzvah. He said, you have to do it. It's a mitzvah that you are a specialist in, that no one else is able to do the same way that you do. And obviously there's some kind of nishmatic calling to this particular mitzvah. So you would be derelict in your responsibilities if you were not to take this particular gift of a mitzvah that you feel more attached to, more seriously than someone else. So you have to leave room for the fact that people who are inspired and moved by different mitzvot. That's okay. You look back in the Tanakh, how many of our matriarchs and patriarchs were noted for, remarkably good at a particular mitzvah, or a particular midah that we learned from them. Avraham Avinu was very hospitable. We don't find the same praise on Yitzchak Avinu. Where do we find that he ever invited someone to his house? Maybe he did. I'm sure he did. We just don't find it. No story that I'm aware of. So he was clearly gifted and talented in other things. It's not to say that he didn't make any contributions. Chas v'shalom. Maybe restraint, control, focus. But Avraham Avinu was very active, very outgoing, more involved this way. So there is such thing as people finding motivation and inspiration in or by different things, and you have to acknowledge this too. The point is that there is something tremendous to this, the culture of embellishment and the culture of luxury. The reason there is good food, good wines, fancy bread, etc., good meats, it's all for Shabbat. Part of the beauty of the Shabbat is that we're supposed to be able to appreciate the finer things in life. Maybe during the rest of the week a little bit less so. But the idea that Shabbat should motivate us and inspire us to do more, to spend more than we normally would, to wear nicer clothing than we usually do, this is, thank God, been a part of the culture for thousands of years. So at least on Shabbat and Yom Tov, people kind of appreciate and realize this. But the same can be said for lots of areas of life. The Beit Knesset is a good example as any. I'm speaking about this for years, but it's funny, you go to a community, other Rabbanim have said this, before you even see the Beit Knesset, visit the houses of people who live in it. Because people typically will invest. If it's my house, hey, I want the best marble in my kitchens. I want, solid gold toilets. I want to make sure that everything is luxurious and beautiful as possible. Comes to Beit Knesset, so as long as it passes inspection. Like once the fire department can walk in and say, it's okay for you guys to pray here and to congregate here, that's fantastic. We fulfilled our obligation. We got it done. Why should the Beit Knesset not be the single most beautiful building in a community? I can tell you why. You figure it out for yourself.
It's going to get destroyed.
But yes,
It's going to get blown up. It's going to.
By whom?
in times of when we were less free to practice.
You could say the same for a private house. People can attack the
Yeah,
private
the
house.
center of congregation.
I would be inclined to presume that if we invested the way we're supposed to in the Beit Knesset, maybe people would take it more seriously, be more motivated or inspired. They can walk into a beautiful Beit Knesset and be like, "Wow, this place, I just feel like praying." Or you can walk into one of these smaller, older, kind of run-down Beit Knesset and can't wait to leave because the door in the bathroom doesn't close right. I don't know. Okay, so there's motivation and inspiration, and beauty plays a big role in this. And there's, it passes, it's cute, it gets the job done, but it's not really my thing. So Chazal would point this out. Yefet is actually the great granddaddy of the Greek genealogy. Yaft Elohim Yefet v'yishkan b'al Hashem. So Yaft could be Putia in Aramaic means width or breadth, how wide or broad something is. So Noah gives this bracha to Yefet, right? Shem, Cham, Yefet, his three sons. So Shem is the patriarch, if you will, of the Semitic peoples. Shem, Sem, S-E-M in English, Sem. And Yefet is blessed with beauty. This what happened with Ham when he did what he did with his father, and Shem and Yefet came together. So the bracha that the Greeks received was a bracha of beauty, typical of the Kabbalistic perspective, to find the good point, the good angle, the good aspect of even an oppressive culture, and to learn from it. It must come to teach us something. These people must be doing something that we have to learn from them. And the answer when it comes to the Greeks was this: they were capable of beauty. They were capable of doing things in a beautiful way, of investing in beauty and appreciation for these finer things in life. Unfortunately, they were the bad example, where they invested only in this, in the culture. I did in the beginning, they had philosophers. Don't know how far that went. Seems like sport and wine and drink kind of took over. But the idea that there's something we can learn even from them shouldn't be so foreign to us. It's a bit of a lesson. It's ironic. I haven't seen anybody write about this, but if you ever do, tell them I came up with the idea without seeing it. That the Greeks happened to come into our lives when Beit HaMikdash was around, but not so. I say it didn't occupy maybe the first 2 or 3 tiers on our national priority list. People were more interested in assimilation, were more interested in finding a culture that was prettier, that was nicer, that was fancier. And the Greeks come into the picture, and all of a sudden we realize, hey, wait a second, we have our own culture, we have our own identity. As a matter of fact, it happens to be a great culture. Beit HaMikdash is a very special place. And we should not only maintain it, not only carry it on, not only pass it on to our kids, dragging our feet, we should actually love it, adore it, cherish it, embellish it, decorate it, fancify it, beautify it, etc. We really should make efforts not only to rededicate Beit HaMikdash, but to make it beautiful, to make it awe-inspiring, to make it motivating. And this is the idea behind this concept of the Mahadrim and the Mahadrim when it comes to Hanukkah. The Pnei Yeshua says, it's the only place in the entire Gemara that you find this expression, but it comes to the very nature of Hanukkah is such that we're not just celebrating survival, we're not just celebrating subsistence. The point of Hanukkah is that we got this mitzvah done in the ideal way. Despite unideal circumstances, Hashem allowed us to perform this mitzvah in the ideal way, basically giving us a pat on the back and saying, good for you for getting the message. If the Greeks taught you something about beauty and aesthetics and doing things in the right, proper, ideal way, that was the point. And if you can stand up for yourselves, you can fight over your culture and your identity, and then hope and pray the mitzvah gets done in the ideal way, I salute you. That's the point. Do it right, do it ideally, make it beautiful, don't be shy, don't be embarrassed. Their culture was totally rotten, but they didn't have any problems decorating it, painting it, and mass-producing it. No reason we should be any more shy than they were, and that's the idea. The fight against assimilation is not just let's survive and get it done. It's we're going to be assimilated. We're going to lose our culture and our identity if we don't take it seriously to the point that we invest in it beyond what's required or what's necessary in order to inspire and motivate the next generation as well. Quick break.